And we have 60 people so far from all around the world. And please introduce yourself in the chat. Ecuador, from the Rijksmuseum, Italy, Spain, Romania. This is wonderful. Please introduce yourself and say where you're from, which country, and just good morning to everybody. This is really fun. This is really lovely. So should we start our presentation or our webinar? Can I ask everybody to turn off their mics? If you'd like to turn on the webcam, that's great. Then we'll see your beautiful faces. But most of the conversation will be in the chat. Oh, Montenegro, wow, Suffolk, England, Greece, Germany. This feels like the Eurovision. This is wonderful. Hello from Cardiff, Germany, a Brazilian in Germany. Wow, Italy. Keep going, Italy. We're all caring about you, we're all thinking about you. Germany, wonderful. Of course you're Irish. Hi, Adrian. Hi. Good morning to everybody. Okay, welcome this morning to our Europeana Communicators community webinar. The webinar that's a from home webinar. We're a specialist community from the Europeana Network Association, and we're made up of communication professionals from museums, libraries, and galleries and archives across Europe and beyond. And I think the word beyond is really important today because we're seeing people in our webinar from all over the world, and that's really exciting. So our aim is to strengthen the digital cultural heritage sector by promoting digital cultural heritage in action and supporting each other to be the best communications professionals that we can be. So this is all about communication. And at the moment, could you please turn off your mic? We're all constantly being told to break the chain, not to meet in the physical world. We're endangering one another by being in their physical presence. But we're asking you to keep the chain going. Keep the chain going. It's all about staying connected and sharing our culture and our cultural values with our friends at this time, particularly with our friends and colleagues. But on the other hand, and this is a message from Beth, from our manager in the European, be overwhelmed by the vast quantities of information that's coming at us, especially all the scary stuff. Make choices and choose and share the good stuff. Choose the stuff that works for you and your institution. So, and for housekeeping now. Can we have the next slide? So as I said, please keep your microphone muted. We're delighted to see everybody's smiling faces, and do smile, on the webcam. And it's important to note that this webinar is being recorded and parts of it will be made available, or maybe made available online. So if anybody has a problem with this, please contact us and let us know if you would like us to do anything about this. And of course, you're all invited to join us, our European Communicators. I think most of you are already in our Communicators group, our communication and our community. But you can see the link here and you can join us on a regular basis. At the end of this webinar, which is just 1 hour long, please let us know through our survey, and you can see the link here. All the links are in the chat, and all the information that you share with us is available to everybody with an online doc. So keep the conversation alive and going, and while you're with us, do tweet. Enjoy your tweets and use the hashtag of Europeana Communities. So I think we're ready to get going. If you have any questions, you'll find the link again in the chat. Beth, could you put it in the chat again at this point? The questions will be put into the document at the Culture from Home, and perhaps put that link in from time to time so people don't have to scroll back. And here we invite you to put your questions or comments into the table with your name, or remain anonymous, whatever works for you, and we'll address as many as possible. There's also a space in the document that you can add your own links of the activities that you know about and the campaigns that you think is useful to others, because this is a community of sharers, and this is a time we would love to hear from our community so that we can strengthen our community and add more and more links and connections and keep the chain going. The next slide. I'm Susan Khazan. I'm moderating today. I'm co-chair with Peter and Killian of the European Communicators. We'll be hearing from two representatives from our community, Alexandra Strefakowska. She's from the Europeana Foundation, Senior Online Marketing Specialist. And then we'll have some questions through the online doc to Alex, and I hope she'll have an opportunity to answer your questions. And then we'll be speaking with Peter Sommers, who's the chair of the Europeana Communicators. So we're ready to start now, and I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Alex. Let me just introduce you, Alex. Alex is responsible for Europeana's social media. That's quite a responsibility. She's passionate about sharing cultural heritage in fun and accessible ways. She's the organizer of the Give It Up competition, wonderful competition, encouraging, I sound like Donald Trump, got a wonderful competition, encouraging people to create animated GIFs from cultural heritage content. And she's also the creator of Europeana's colouring books. Did you know we have colouring books? Can we have a link in the text here for the colouring books in the chat? So over to you, Alex.
Hello, everyone. It's really great that so many of you are here. So as Susan mentioned at the beginning, there is a lot going on in cultural heritage online these days. And it starts to be a bit difficult to keep up with everything, to know what is the best, what you should do as a museum, how to choose, what will bring the best results, what is the best for your communities and audiences. So today I grouped various activities done by different institutions in a few categories so that each of you can do a little mix and match and see what is the best for your museum, your communities, and your audiences. Next slide, Georgia. Yeah, so those categories are entertainment, quizzes and voting, education, creativity, well-being and aesthetics, and working with communities. And they, of course, overlap a little bit, but I find it's a good way to classify them and to let you be a bit of mindful what activities you want to choose, what will work, not only for this time of crisis, but in general. So I will start with an umbrella hashtag, Museum from Home. So if you can only access one hashtag, this is the one where you find a lot. It started actually with museum employees recording short 1-minute videos about items from their collections, but it escalated quickly to everything related to the museums at this time. Georgia, next slide. So, entertainment is something that a lot of people need these days, and some museums do things that are easily approachable, easy to organize as an institution, but also easy for the users to interact with. So, for example, Museum Jigsaw is just creating puzzles from masterpieces. It can seem maybe simple and silly, but the thing is, while completing such a puzzle, the users interact with an artwork for much longer than when they are at the museum, even including reading the all the information about this art. And they look at all the details, not for the reason of like knowing the content or appreciate art, but just to put those puzzles together. So it's a way of interacting with art without expertise, and I find it really nice. Another way of interacting with the users are quizzes and voting. So many museums use Instagram stories for it. It's a very nice way to ask the users questions or let them make choices and at the same time educate them. So Maritime Museum work does something like this daily. They present different part of their collections with beautiful pictures, with nicely bit-sized information, and they ask some questions, as you can see on the slide. Maurits House from The Hague in the Netherlands explains an artwork daily and lets the user choose which artwork will be explained the next day. And this is very simple. You can just vote this or the other one, and then you learn it about on the next day. Next slide. So education. Education is a bit disrupted those days. A lot of kids are not at school. People are not at the university. Parents have to share the devices with children very often. So museums and cultural institutions in general can have a role in helping people educate. Some examples that I've chosen are welcome collections. So they are doing something that really matches the character of the collection. They are just explaining what is quarantine, what were the plagues and pandemics in the past. And what is really great is that for us, it's exceptional for our lifetime, but they are able to show us that it's something that happened in the history, and it gives a very nice perspective. Another way of educating is what Palace of Versailles is doing. They are specifically helping high schoolers with repeating for their high school final exams. So on their website and on their social media, they are daily sharing information, and they help learn through their artworks. And now that it's quite difficult to get normal classes, of course, people try to learn online. There are different things prepared by the teachers, but in the situation when you have to share devices, when it all gets a bit fragmented, I find it really interesting that Versailles specifically chose this one audience to help them with something that is very serious. It's a high school exam, and they will have to pass it in very exceptional conditions. So for museums which can do it, I think it's a good idea. A small thing about education is, from our own experience, is what we did a couple of weeks with Washing Hands Gallery. So this was something that a couple of weeks ago just started when the pandemic also started in Europe. We saw though this information shared in many different ways, and we thought, can we also try to educate people? How do we do it? We decided to do it from cultural heritage scope, because this is what we have, this is the content we own, and we got a very nice response to it. So this was kind of a quick and easy way to educate people, but it worked. The next one is creativity. So this is a bit the back, the previous one still. So this is a bit the area where everything is possible. And the pictures that you see on the slide, a lot of museums do it right now, asking the audiences to recreate the paintings. We had something similar in Europeana under the name of Van Gogh Yourself. There is also an Instagram initiative called 2 Seconds in Quarantaine, which means between art and quarantine. And a lot of museums, for example, Getty, pick up these ideas and do it with their own community. So this is something fun for people when they are a bit bored at home and they need something creative to do. And as you see, results are really, really cool. Another example of it is color our collections. Suzanne, you were talking about links for coloring books. So yeah, under this hashtag, you'll find the links for it. And it's an activity that takes place every February, but for now it's something that's very relevant and that a lot of institutions can take advantage from. Coloring pages can help both children who need calm activity or also the adults who just want to interact with art in a calming way. Next slide. Well-being and aesthetics. So here, Zoom covers. As we are in the situation for a couple of weeks, everyone has seen their colleagues' apartments and this kind of stuff. So through creating Zoom covers, you can do something new and show a nice artwork in the background. For example, Smithsonian has made a series, but many other institutions as well. We in Europeana are also preparing some, so stay put. There is also a museum moment of Zen, which is about featuring this kind of calming, aesthetically pleasing images and artworks just for like a moment of peace, which is similar to like a museum experience. And a very cute activity that different museums are doing is museum bouquet. This is sending a bouquet of flowers to another museum or to the community. I find it really cute because it's spring and we cannot go outside. And this is the way to see some flowers when you cannot see them outside. And the last category is working with communities. So a lot of institutions already picked up and started to actually collect the stories and items related to this pandemic from their communities. For example, Nordiska Museet in Sweden does it, or Vienna Museum, or People's Collection in Wales. And this is also cool, like documenting history as it happens. And the last one that I have is about a museum from my city, which is Rotterdam, which I love. And this is about Museum Rotterdam, which has an activity called Thuis op straat, which means at home on the street. And normally it's about playing games with the kids in like a bit difficult neighborhoods and this kind of things. Now that no one cannot play on the street, the community is helping older people by delivering shopping and medicines. So it shows that the community can change the function and do something still that is useful, even if it's not their typical museum activity. So I started with the games, I finished with this, and this is to show that it's always useful to make choices and always think about your audiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. That's amazing. So much rich material out there and so many good things to do. And don't forget, you'll find the links to everything that our speakers are talking about today, firstly in the chat, and then in the Culture from Home special doc that's been prepared. And then after this, we're documenting everything on Europeana Pro, and you'll find that in the event from today. And all the links will be there on a permanent basis. So all this stuff, so many things have has been said, it's very difficult to see them all, but they're all retrievable. I'd just like to make a comment. You're 92 people from all around the world today coming together in this Europeana communication community. And this is a very, very exciting moment for all of us. We are one world, we are one community, and we can keep the chain going. It's up to us to communicate and keep our cultural heritage, our cultural values, keep them going. I think it's wonderful. So I just want to look at the questions that have been put into our doc. And the questions for Alex in the moment, may or may not be, we may not be able to answer them all, but this is a conversation that's just starting today and will continue in our community and on Europeana Pro, on our LinkedIn group, and all the our newsletter and all the different ways you can keep connected to the communicators in Europeana. And the first question, perhaps Alex, you'd like to answer this, or possibly Georgia or Beth. Jochen Ruchel said, is there already a group in Europeana trying to strengthen the medical and healing cultures? Is this something that Beth has already answered? Beth is answering Jochen that she will put you directly in touch with the research community, and she thinks that they're best placed to have a conversation about this. So, it's a very nice question here from Mr. Anonymous or Mrs. Anonymous. What is the function, Alex, for you? What is the function of GLAMS in the pandemic?
The function, it can be two things. So it can be either do good for the communities, as Museum Rotterdam is doing, which is very close to the communities, and they are just physically helping. And there are different ways of doing it, even giving like masks and equipment, like, I don't know, disinfection gels can be that, because museums can have it. The other thing is to make the people and audiences feel good. And this is something that we try to do online. And what I find important is to make choices, always think about your community, because for some situation jokes are good, but for some maybe they are in like very difficult situation personally, they need another type of support. So I think a lot of good has to be done, but we have to be careful not to overwhelm, while also trying to stay creative and learn for ourselves, because this pandemic is for a couple of months, but everything that we'll learn doing now online and everything that we'll practice and improvise can be useful later in still engaging with the communities and also in bridging offline and online.
Thank you. But a question from Beth here. What do you think is the easiest kind of activity that people can undertake? And she's talking about the lowest thresholds. People don't have very much ability to concentrate at the moment. So what's the lowest threshold participation for institutions?
The lowest threshold for the institutions, in my opinion, would be going on Instagram. So at the moment, it's the travel content, the lifestyle, fashion. You see a little bit less of that because the situation kind of doesn't encourage sharing this kind of content. There is less. And even if it's shared, it's older stuff. It's not original. So Instagram, I think, is the most similar to a classic museum experience, let's say. So like an image and a description that will still get attention. It's visual and it's easy to go for it. So I think this would be that. For the users, I think it could be something like a game, because everyone wants a distraction, and something like a puzzle could mimic playing with a puzzle with another image, but then with an artwork instead. Okay, and a couple of questions. Thank you, Alex. I completely agree with everything you said. That's brilliant. A couple of questions about Zoom. Manon is asking what software do you use to design the Zoom background? And of course, you can just upload something on your computer from something online, so you don't actually have to design very much. But Alex, what do you use in your background in Zoom? Of course, you choose something from Europeana. What is your choice? Guys, there will be something coming which will be really nice, and you will see the choices of background not only of myself but of my whole team. So I will not say now, but stay put for in a couple of days. But about designing, it's indeed what you need is a high resolution big image. And if you want to design something like make a collage or like combine a few images, there are plenty of options of free software, for example, Canva, that lets you do this kind of stuff. And anyway, we'll post a link later, but a lot of software for creative activities and a bit like social media managing have like a prolonged free trial. So I think this is a good time indeed to play with different kinds of tools that you can play in normal situations.
Thank you for your answers, but I see the questions are piling up. So we'll have to come back to them at a later point, perhaps at the end, because it's now time to move to our next speaker, our very own Peter. And Peter, are you ready to present? Let me just introduce you. Peter is the chair of our communicators community, and he calls himself an avid museum visitor, an art lover, and somebody who cares passionately for open access to collections. So Peter, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Susan, for introducing me so nicely. At first, I want to apologize that I will mostly be speaking about museums and their staff, due to my personal preferences. But libraries, archives, freelance cultural workers, artists, performing artists are just as important in these days. Many of them now have a lot to endure. Thumbs up. I will pick out some examples of museums coming to me, their audiences. We heard a lot from Alex about this already. But I will give my personal take on them as a social media user and culture enthusiast. My personal take means that I'm not looking for technical perfection or the most brilliant applications. I'm always looking for the intention museums have. Do they try to serve the needs of their audiences? Are they trying to get in touch with their actual communities? Are they trying to respond to needs in society? This is my personal drive to serve in Europeana as well, and I hope I can reach the standards I'm setting for myself. Okay, let's start. Please note the hyperlinks in my slides are all in the Google Doc, in the same where you can note your questions. Thank you, Georgia, for this sheet. At first, an announcement. Today, a Twitter conference will take place immediately after this webinar about digital heritage in the time of virus. Europeana is involved as well. Check out the program and join in if you want. Next slide, please, Georgia. Museums need platforms to come to us, users, visitors, citizens. Because Stefan Bartolomei would present about a platform, but he is not able to present today, I want to mention it here without further details. It is DDB Studio, a platform hosted by the German Digital Library, enabling even small institutions to host and curate virtual exhibitions. Several types of content can be used. Next slide, please. Another project that deserves our attention is called Museum at Home. It is a platform being developed right now, suitable for institutions and private persons as well, to be filled with content curated from Wikimedia. It derives from hackathon We Against Virus in Germany and is open source. Community thinking and community doing is great in this project. Check it out. People are welcoming your input. Next slide, please. And now we are getting to the promised examples on the web. Via hashtag #MyHomeIsMyMuseum, people are turning these things around. Show the artworks that are in your home via social media. This is an example by Heike Röckler from Germany. She is a museum professional as well. Next slide, please. Picasso and Matisse, Beauty is a Line, is an exhibition in Rijksmuseum Twente in the east of the Netherlands. Short after opening, the museum had to close its doors. The digital equivalent on the website enables to visit many objects from this exhibition by scrolling horizontally, with images, text and video clips in it. I like this one because it is pretty good, giving an impression of the real analog exhibition I saw with my own eyes just in time. Next slide, please. I can be very short about this. Singer Museum Laren is preparing video clips especially for kids. Next slide, please. But Singer Laren does more. It prepared a special segment on the website for kids. This is a screenshot from a part of Recycle Rodin. Kids can learn here about Rodin, about recycling materials that otherwise would be thrown away as waste, and they get some inspiration for creating their own version of the thinker. This is more than watching just another video clip. I could imagine there is a real need for things like this. Next slide, please. This could be the result. Thank you. Next slide, please. Keep in touch with your communities. Mauritshuis got a new director. Yesterday she had her first working day. The museum published almost real-time a video showing how she enters the empty building and ponders about her new job. This is a very nice way to stay connected to your community. But I cannot guarantee the video is made really yesterday. But I like the idea. The next slide, please. That's the last one. Keep in touch with your communities in times of social distancing. A film crew of National Gallery of Denmark is visiting staff members at home and interviews them from outside. They are opening their windows in order to stay connected with their audiences. Here we see Merete Sanderhoff speaking about open collections and Wikipedia. Okay guys, this was it. Stay connected with your audiences and communities. Stay at home and safe. Happy to receive your questions.
Thank you, Peter. That was very inspirational and very, very important at this time. We have a couple of questions for you, which I'll turn to in a sec. I just wanted to say that we're 93 people. People have been coming in all the time, and that's a lot of people coming together today. This very exciting moment to share all this good kind of links, connections, and creativity. But would you please, those who haven't or those who already have, could you introduce yourself in the chat? Could you tell us who you are, where you're from, and your country? Because we're seeing people from all over the world, and that's really exciting. 92 people from all over the place. That's a pretty good moment. And I hope that you'll stay in touch with us, with our community. You'll sign up for our newsletter, you'll sign up for our LinkedIn group, and you'll keep connected even after the webinar. Now, we have a couple of questions so far for you, Peter. Let me go to the first one. Tessa Baumann. She's asked a very interesting question. How can sites dealing with difficult topics, such as Holocaust memorials and former concentration camp sites, create content that suits the visitor's needs in this time of crisis? Being entertaining or calming is rather difficult here, but it's important to stay in touch with visitors nevertheless. So can we have your thoughts on this, Peter? I know this is something you've thought about in the past.
Yes, so Normally I need 30 minutes to give an answer, but we don't have that. So I will tell you what immediately comes to my mind. And what immediately comes to my mind is what Auschwitz is doing on Twitter in times where we were before the pandemic. And I have no idea what they are doing now, but what they did before that was really great. But that's not really an answer to your question. And I have not a lot to say on that at this moment. I'm just
Okay,
too slow in things like this. Maybe we have somebody.
we have somebody from one of these institutions around the world that could jump in here with an answer. In a few minutes, we're going to have a general conversation, which is open to everybody. So the third part of the doc is available to you to add your questions. And if anybody would like to respond with their answers, then please let us know. And we'll be very happy to hear from everybody, not at the same time, but one by one. Perhaps just sort of indicate in the chat that you want to respond, and we'll know who's coming online next. One more question, Peter, to you. And that's,
Hi, Susan. I'm Larissa. I just thought I could maybe jump in and say something.
Sure.
That's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, everyone. I'm Larissa Borg. I work at the Swedish National Heritage Board. And I think what is really important here is that we still have to focus on the collections and the data that we have available. So not every museum can, of course, be entertaining or be as flexible in their approaches to social media as, for example, art museums. I think that's something we have to keep in mind. We speak a lot about art museums and the stuff they have in their collections. But I think just as this example mentioned in the question, we also have to stick to what museums in their specific cases have and how they react to their communities in the usual way. So I think that we have to also acknowledge that there are museums that have totally different possibilities, actually, because of the resources they have. And especially when it comes to, for example, difficult collections or difficult histories to represent, they have to have different approaches. And I think that is something that is really important. And I think this question was really valuable. What I saw with museums on social media that have, for example, like the Auschwitz memorial, so that they have to, like, for example, stick also to their strategies they have had before, and for example, sharing stories and sharing things from their collections, but acknowledging that these are different times, so that the communities may react differently. And just as, for example, Peter also mentioned that you have to monitor closely how your communities react, I think this is the most important thing that museums can do right now. Those that are already active on social media and are sharing and interacting with the communities on a regular level will actually see how their strategies that they have had before are working right now.
There is
okay.
Timely.
So I'd like to say something about Anne Frank House. So this is, of course, something that they prepared beforehand because it took time, but they actually made Anne Frank as a vlogger rather than diary writer. And there is a series on YouTube. And of course, it was made beforehand, but it was totally following their strategy and the way they interacted with the audience. And this timing is actually accidental, but it shows that them continuing to do what they did works perfectly, also in this situation. But even without, it would still be a great idea.
Exactly, Alex, and I think that this is really interesting, actually, is that strategies, that those museums and those GLAMs that have had strategies before have it easier now because they can adapt and they already know their communities well. Those that are now turning to digital to actually have an a different approach to actually engage with their communities, because they focused on the physical and the buildings before. They have it much harder right now because they don't know a lot about their communities and don't know how the strategies they could have had before would work now. Sorry, Susan.
No, absolutely. I just want to make a call. I'm taking off my hat for a moment because I need to make a comment here. I think you know, but at the moment, the museums and the web international conference is taking place completely online in a series of webinars and online conversations. And some of the social meetings are taking place in Second Life. Those of you who may remember Second Life from probably 10 years ago, there were some very interesting museum islands that were created. I know our museum certainly created one, but the US Holocaust Museum in Washington built a brilliant site in Second Life with the most difficult material, obviously, from the Holocaust period. It was actually about Kristallnacht. You can actually walk through a community in Germany at the moment of the riots that were stimulated by Kristallnacht in a very kind of poignant Second Life 3D social real-time permanent space that was very, very well done. So yeah, a lot of museums know already how to use these tools, and they've been doing it for a while. So I'm sure the post-pandemic tools will come into action quite quickly. Let me just go back to Peter. There's one more question for you, Peter, which I really would like you to answer now. Can you explain, Peter, in more detail about the initiative, A Museum in My Home? Because Emmy Diaz from Ecuador is interested to be in contact with the museum's audience, her museum's audience.
Okay, yes, ready to do that. I don't know who initiated it. It works via this hashtag on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and maybe some other platforms as well. It didn't go viral. It's not a big initiative, but it's just something I liked. And it's very easy to join in using this hashtag. And like Heike Rökler explains in this screenshot I posted, it's nice to tell something about the object you have. So it's something like a very tiny exhibition of one artwork, but it is things you have at home. And that is really nice, that in some way your museum could be a museum as well. And if you cannot present objects from your museum, you could maybe present things you have at home.
I just want to remind you all, this is the first line of an open conversation. We're all connected now in real time, but we will all continue our conversations and all the new conversations that are springing up in the next few weeks, months, possibly years. This is the beginning of a new movement. We're using new ways to communicate. We're learning with new water wings how to swim in this new sea. And this isn't a conversation that we will today at 12 o'clock, whatever the time is, 11 o'clock. So keep connected to us, and we will continue the questions and answers in the future. But there's a question here, and I want to call on Mariana, our very own Mariana from our community, our communicators community. And the question is here, and I'd like Mariana to answer, what would be the best activity that we could keep after COVID-19 crisis during the time when we would try and heal our traumas and economies? Mariana, would you like to answer?
Yes, thank you. Good morning to everybody. I'm Mariana from Italy, from Invasioni Digitali, Digital Invasions Association. I much appreciated the last comment about monitoring communities and how communities may react to differently to the things that we are doing online. I would love to highlight one best practice. Well, I think it's best practice in this way, like using a conventional tool to engage a community by a museum. And a museum in Utrecht, it's a religious Art Collection Museum, they have set a hotline, telephone hotline. It's called Miracle Hotline. It's a telephone hotline that claims to offer the chance to visit, obviously, the museum and experience the museum. But the thing that I like a lot is that they are engaging people where people are. And above all, they are letting people talk to museums about their experiences, about their dreams. The hotline works like that. If you press 1, obviously, you can talk with a staff member and visit the museum. But pressing 2, you can tell your own experiences about miracles. And you can tell your experience about one piece of the museum or about your life. So it's like a psychological approach, you know. And pressing 3 in the hotline, so we're talking about a telephone, so not digital. It's like a very conventional method. Pressing 3, callers can request their own miracle. So I think that
Wow.
this is a great example. Yeah, this is a great example of using a conventional tool to engage people, because we are all thinking about digital tools. You know, my association, my organization is called Digital Invasion, so you can imagine. But I think that using conventional tool to engage also people who don't use digital tools every day, it's a great example of you know, staying connected to your communities, and asking people to, you know, to do something, to dream of something. It's a great example of how to go through like a difficult period. No, well, I liked it a lot, so I wanted to share it.
Could you please send us a link so that we can find it and perhaps make a
Yeah,
telephone?
absolutely. Yeah, it's the Catherine Convent Museum in Utrecht. I will write it in the chat.
And what language do we communicate in over the telephone?
Yeah, it's obviously in the local language. It's for local people.
Yeah, but I think it's brilliant. I would love to hear that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mariana. Thank you for coming in. Anybody else from our communicators group? Killian, would you like make any comment or join in the conversation? Or can we open the conversation to the floor? We have about 9 minutes left. If anybody would like to speak, this is your opportunity. We would like to hear about your projects. What have you been doing? What has been successful? What are you planning? And particularly, we're hoping that we will come out of this soon, and we will be rebuilding our cultural, physical links, our museums, our libraries and archives, inviting people back into public spaces, and we're beginning to rebuild our lives after this period. People are referring it to a BC and a post, a before Corona and then a post-Corona moment, because things will change after. I mean, I think about my museum, the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. Who's going to be visiting a museum? Who's going to be visiting my museum? Who and how are we going to come back? Do we come back with masks? Do we come back to a museum with gloves? Do we come back and keep social distancing from each other? Do we listen to talks in groups of 2 or 5? Do we keep separate in the gallery? All these questions are going to be faced by our museums. So has anybody any ideas about a post-Corona moment? Is anybody planning for this sweet time? Oh, I see that the chat is full of really good ideas. So yes, please continue in the chat. Lovely. But would anybody like to speak now and come up with and share one of the projects that they're doing or they're planning on doing in the near future?
I think there's a comment in the chat from Larissa saying she'd like to comment, but from a minute ago, I'm not sure which question it was on. Larissa.
Hey everyone, I hope it's okay that I speak again. I just wanted to comment on the last idea of the okay, how can we use, for example, telephones and other things. I think what we see in the last days and weeks is actually that it doesn't really matter if we focus on digital or physical or analog means to actually engage with our communities. I think this is just something that is not relevant anymore. I think that what we see in the last weeks is actually that we can only rely on distant means of connection to our communities, but that it's really the relevance that institutions have for their communities, whether it's digital, physical, or whatever, to actually engage with each other. And I think that we have to overcome also this idea of, okay, do we engage on digital, do we engage on physical, whatever. It's really about the relationships that we have built. And I think you see that especially with really small and institutions, and also voluntarily led institutions. That it's not only about how they engage in different realms, but how they actually have a holistic approach to how they see their communities and how they want to be relevant. So I really like, for example, the that you, Alex, mentioned also the ideas of, or the approaches to collect objects and stories of everyday life in coronavirus times. So that these really show, for example, the Nordic Museum here in Stockholm has collected more than 2,000 stories so far in less than a few weeks. I think it's 2 weeks now. And they really show that whether they can be relevant in the digital realm and in the physical realm, and it doesn't really matter where they are, but that they care about their communities and find the ways that are important to their communities and not that work for them right now or later.
Thank you, Larissa. That's very important. But Killian, I see you're frantically typing away with wonderful examples of GLAMs, collecting stories around the pandemic. Can you jump in here and perhaps tell us something that you've seen and the examples that you just put into our list? Can you join us? We were too busy typing. Killian, can you hear me?
Hi, how's it going? Can you hear me?
Yeah, great, thanks. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I just wanted to chime in with a few examples I had seen from the University of Stirling, the archives there, and also a kind of a family history centre in Glasgow. But they were doing exactly what kind of Larissa just mentioned there, collecting the kind of ordinary things, almost the memorabilia, connected to the kind of the wide spectrum of people's experience during this pandemic. And I think it's been quite a kind of a grassroots kind of approach to it, which I kind of find fascinating. And I think one of the comments just in the chat window of the GoToMeeting here was that, can we save some of the links? So I think we can definitely do that and add that into a kind of a list at the end that will be kind of emailed back to any people on this call. Thanks, Sheena. And but I mean, there are so many different types of kind of activities coming out of this, and it would be something I will be considering as well, coming from a university context, and looking at how can we capture all the different types of communications and activities and kind of ways in which individuals are reacting to the pandemic, and whether that's to kind of counter misinformation or disinformation online, or by using social media to have a kind of a very immediate Q&A. Let's say, if I think I've seen one yesterday on Facebook Live, where it was just simple questions about how to keep your kind of children occupied, you know, which is incredibly difficult at this time, to how often to visit your parents or your grandparents. So just kind of really
Oh, we've lost Killian.
And kind of find a way to look. Thanks,
Okay,
Susan.
I think I'll take over now, because what I'd like to do is actually wrap up. I want to thank my speakers, and perhaps I'd like to go back to you briefly, Alex and Peter, for a wrap up, one line each. I want to thank everybody who's made this possible. behind the scenes, Georgia, who's been clicking away on the PowerPoint, and our dear Beth, who's done all the hard work in the background, and Stefan, who unfortunately couldn't join us. We miss you terribly, and we hope you'll join us next time. And I want to thank everybody who's joined us, and I haven't had a chance to read all the chat, but I can't wait to read all the comments. It feels very dynamic and very rich. Most important, in order to understand where we're going for our future webinars, please fill in the Survey Monkey, the Culture from Home Survey Monkey. The link is here, and of course, all our links are connected, are documented, will be available to you. But your input here in the survey will help us create the next best webinar that we can possibly do. So if I've forgotten to thank somebody, sorry. And can I just have a wrap up from Alex and then Peter, and then we'll say goodbye after that. Thank you so far. Alex, one.
So thanks everyone for being here. I see the chat bursting with ideas. I see everyone commenting that it was great to keep in touch and to exchange. And I would say keep it up and let's stay in touch for now and for after all this pandemic situation, because everything that we learn now, it will stay with us.
And Peter, from you?
Yes, what I like to say, there is a sentence that states Europeana is not about a portal, Europeana is about community. And that is the thing that we have at this moment right now. And I would ask you, if you have ideas how to carry this on in future, please use the survey to drop your ideas. Thank you.
My parting word to everybody is thank you for taking your time and joining us. Thank you for continuing to be communicators with us. Stay in contact. And most important, take care, be healthy. We'll get through this together. Thank you.